Today we're going to be discussing ratios and proportions. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers by division. A ratio is called a rate if the two numbers of a ratio represent measurements with different units such as miles and hours. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equal. Proportions. One way to determine if two ratios form a proportion is to use cross products. In other words, cross multiply. In a proportion, the product of the extremes is equal to the product of the means. So remember, we want to cross multiply. Number one, it says determine whether 7/8 and 49/56 are equivalent ratios. Write yes or no and justify your answer. One way that you can do this is by simplifying each fraction completely. So we know that 7/8 is completely simplified. We can't go any lower than that. 49/56, can that be simplified? Well, yeah, it can. Both of those numbers can be divided by 7. So 49 divided by 7 is 7. 56 divided by 7 is 8. So we take the 7/8, and 49/56 is 7/8. So we would say yes. And the reason why the ratios are equivalent or the same in simplest form. So once you break them down to simplest form, they are the same fraction. Number 2, it says use cross products to determine whether each pair of ratios forms a proportion. So use cross products means to cross multiply. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this 0.25 with the 2. So I'm going to go 0.25 times 2 and see if that's equal to, we don't know, see if that's equal to 0.6 times 1.25. Since these are decimals, you can use a calculator if you want to. So 2 times 0.25 is 0.5. Think 25 cents times 2, you have 50 cents. And 0.6 times 1.25, if you do that, you get 0.75. Are these the same? No, they are not. So it's not a proportion because those numbers are not the same. In B, it says 2 over 2.5 and 16 times 20. So let's do cross products again. So 2 times 20, is that the same as 2.5 times 16? So if you multiply this, you get 40, 2 times 20. And if you multiply 2.5 times 16, you also get 40. So yes, this is a proportion. Sorry. Because the numbers are equal. Number 3, it says solve each proportion. So we're going to do this by cross multiplying. So I'm going to say n times 8, or 8n, equals 12 times 3. So 8n, 12 times 3 is 36. So I'm going to solve that equation by dividing both sides by 8. 8 cannot go into 36, but both of those can be divided by 4. So 36 divided by 4 is 9, and 8 divided by 4 is 2. So I get 9 over 2 equals n. In B, I have x plus 4 over 12 equals 3/4. So again, I'm going to use the distributive property. I'm going to go 4 times x plus 4 equals 12 times 3. So I'm going to have to use the distributive property here. So I have 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 4 is a positive 16, and 12 times 3 is 36. So solve that equation by subtracting both sides by 16, and I get 4x equals 20. Then I would divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals 5. Number 4 says the gear on a bicycle is 8 to 5. This means that for every 8 turns of the pedal, the wheel turns 5 times. Suppose the bicycle wheel turns about 2,435 times during a trip. How many times would you have to crank the pedals during the trip? Well, we know that it's an 8 to 5 ratio, so I can also write it like this, 8 to 5. That means for every 8 turns, so I'm going to write turns over here so you know they go in the numerator, the wheel, so these are pedal turns, and the wheel turns 5 times. Suppose the bicycle wheel turns about, so this is saying the wheel turns about 2,435 times during the trip. How many times would you have to crank the pedal during the trip? So we're going to set that up as a ratio, as you see, in cross multiply. So I'm going to say 8 times 2,435 equals 5 times, we don't know what that is, so I'm just going to let that be x. So 8 times 2,435 is 19,480, and that equals 5x. So to solve for x, I would divide both sides by 5, and when I do, I get 3,896 times. So the answer would be, the question again is how many times would you have to crank the pedals during the trip? And then I'm going to restate the question. You would have to crank the pedals 3,896 times. Number 5 says, in a road atlas, the scale for the map of Connecticut is 5 inches to 41 miles. What is the distance in miles represented by 2.5 inches on the map? Okay, so let's set up our proportion. 5 inches is equal to 41 miles. Okay, so if this says, what is the distance represented by 2.5 inches on the map? So I'm going to put 2.5 inches in the top. We want to keep, if the inches are on the top here, we want to keep inches in the top on this side. And then how many miles would that be? So we're just going to put a D for distance. It doesn't really matter what your variable is, but it just makes sense that it would be a D. Okay, so cross multiply. So we have 5 times D equals 41 times 2.5. When I do that, I get 5D equals 41 times 2.5 is 102.5. Divide 5 by both sides, and you get D equals 20.5. So the question is, what is the distance in miles represented by 2.5 inches on the map? So your answer could be 2.5 inches on the map represents 20.5 miles.